In the far reaches of the galaxy, where suns glowed in hues of lilac and turquoise, and cosmic dust twinkled like distant chimes in a silent symphony, stood the mighty Xerian Empire. It was a civilization whose roots delved into epics so ancient that even its historians sometimes doubted the veracity of their own records. For centuries, Xerian monarchs had ruled from the crystalline spires of the imperial city of Threxos, each successor inheriting the authority, the splendor, and the burden of dominion across 1,000 star systems. Among these rulers, none commanded the same aura of quiet power or possessed such magnetic presence as the current sovereign, Queen Sylara, Empress of the Seven Nebular Realms. Sylara had ascended the throne at a time of relative turbulence. The Xerian Empire, though vast and unchallenged militarily, had begun to crack under the weight of its own traditions. In her first decade of rule, she had quietly ushered in reforms aimed at uniting the fractious lords of the realm and soothing tensions with neighboring star nations. Yet, behind her measured composure lay a keen intellect and a fierce heart, traits that had served her well in confronting both internal dissension and external threats, especially the dreaded Dravax. For as long as Xerians told stories to frighten their children at bedtime, the Dravax had reigned supreme in the darkest corners of the galaxy. These colossal beasts, nearly impervious to conventional weapons, had once devastated entire fleets. Their jaws could rend the hulls of star cruisers, and their shrieks echoed across the vacuum like a requiem of terror. No other species had managed to subjugate a Dravax, let alone farm them, an idea considered laughable by the entire Xerian High Council. It was for precisely this reason that the presence of an Earth delegation in the Imperial Chamber drew such curiosity. Earth, by Xerian calculations, was a humble world, far from the galactic core, with only a few centuries of industrial development behind it. The humans had only begun venturing out of their solar system within recent memory. Yet, they arrived announcing that they had not only slain a Dravax, but had domesticated the species, presenting this discovery in the form of something they called buffalo wings. Queen Sylara, elegant in her shimmering metallic robe, sat upon her throne. Sculpted from a single piece of starlit crystal, it reflected the glow of her emerald-hued skin, the color radiating a regal warmth. Her advisors were gathered around her, wearing similar robes, though none boasted the rich sheen of her own garment. All eyes in the chamber turned toward the main doors. At the appointed hour, the delegation from Earth entered. Lieutenant Adrian Kane, a tall and broad-shouldered figure in a simple, olive-green uniform, took the lead. The ease in his step, the carefree manner of his bow, and the unapologetic curiosity with which he surveyed the vast imperial chamber were unlike anything the Xerian court had ever seen. While most foreign envoys arrived trembling at the grandeur and might of Sylara's realm, these humans appeared fascinated, perhaps awed, but not cowed. Sylara studied them from beneath elegantly arched brows. She was used to measured greetings from foreign dignitaries, often accompanied by flowery tributes or elaborate reverences. Yet, Lieutenant Kane simply stepped forward, placing his right fist over his heart, an earth gesture of respect, she surmised, and spoke in his accent-riddled version of the Xerian dialect. "Your Majesty," he said, with a smile that might have been disarming if not for its boldness. "Earth is deeply honored by this opportunity to strengthen our ties with the Xerian people." The Queen inclined her head in acknowledgement. Although she felt a wisp of amusement at the human's directness, she suppressed it behind her stately composure. "The Xerian Empire welcomes you, Lieutenant Kane," she replied, her voice resonating in the hushed space like a harp's silver strings. "We have long been curious about Earth's recent feats, particularly where it concerns the Dravax." A ripple of interest coursed through the assembled advisors. Whispered speculations filled the hall. Sylara's voice had a commanding gentleness, yet in her question, there was a curiosity that signaled her openness to forging new alliances, if such alliances could prove fruitful. General Orek, one of Sylara's most trusted military leaders, stood to the Queen's right. His broad shoulders and chiseled visage exemplified Xerian martial prowess. But at that moment, his posture hinted at discomfort, as though he braced himself for some shocking revelation. The murmur in the crowd swelled when the humans spoke of their success against the Dravax. The notion challenged all accepted truths in Xerian knowledge. One could sooner chain a living comet than expect to handle a Dravax with anything less than an armada. Kane, still wearing that self-assured smile, bowed again. It is true, Your Majesty. We discovered their weaknesses quite by accident, and once we did, we knew we had to act swiftly. Though her heart pounded with curiosity, Sylara allowed the conversation to unfold with regal patience, listening intently, taking note of the subtle interplay of glances among her advisors. Already, the seeds of doubt and wonder were sown in equal measure. At last, she rose from her throne, a silent signal that the formal proceedings would proceed to the banquet hall. In the Xerian tradition, important diplomatic discussions were best carried out over shared meals and ceremonial toasts, forging a sense of camaraderie. As the immense doors to the grand dining hall opened, Sylara beckoned Kane and his fellow delegates to accompany her, aware that the real revelations were yet to come, and that this would be no ordinary feast. She sensed the tension in the air, as though every eye in the empire watched her next move. The Xerian court excelled at reading their sovereign's intentions, and she, in turn, had mastered the art of concealing her deeper thoughts. But in that moment, she could not resist a spark of excitement for what lay ahead. The humans had arrived with a startling claim, and if true, it would reshape the galaxy's balance of power. Thus began a new chapter in the annals of Xerian history, an era poised on the brink of transformation, all because of the presence of a people once dismissed as little more than backwater upstarts. Little did Queen Sylara know that the mystery she was about to unravel would lead her not just to a new alliance, but to a profound shift in how her empire, indeed, the entire galaxy, viewed the impossible and the unimaginable. The banquet hall, known as the Stellar Arcadium, had been prepared with all the pomp befitting the presence of the empire's most honored guests. Towering columns carved from obsidian-like stone lined the perimeter, each inlaid with streams of liquid crystal that pulsed with subtle light, mimicking the distant flow of cosmic energies. Overhead, a magnificent dome of iridescent glass reflected the shifting colors of 100 chandeliers, each shaped like a drifting nebula captured in luminescent form. At the head of the grand table, a place of honor was arranged for Queen Sylara, Lieutenant Kane, and their respective advisors. Servants in robes of silver and teal moved gracefully through the hall, carrying trays loaded with delicacies gathered from the far-flung reaches of the Xerian Empire. Plates and goblets of alien design graced the table, forming intricate patterns that sparkled under the gentle glow of overhead lights. Kane appeared genuinely impressed by the spectacle. Sylara, watching him discreetly, recognized that while he might have lacked the refined etiquette typical of her court, he bore an honest admiration for the Xerian aesthetic. Occasionally, he cast a glance her way, almost as if curious about her reaction to the forthcoming Earth dish, the famed Dravax wings. She kept her composure, allowing only the faintest of smiles to dance at the corners of her lips. When the servants finally unveiled Earth's contribution to the feast, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. On large platters were arranged cuts of meat from the legendary Dravax, marinated and spiced in the style the humans called buffalo. At a wave of Kane's hand, one of his companions, a boisterous man with sandy hair named Sergeant Yates, stood and announced with a broad grin, "It's a tradition back on Earth, especially in certain regions, to marinate wings with this spicy sauce. We adapted the recipe for Dravax, though I must say, these aren't exactly wings in the literal sense." A ripple of astonishment traveled through the Xerian officials. The idea that this apex predator, capable of destroying warships with little effort, now lay subdued upon a silver tray, glistening with tangy sauce, was nearly incomprehensible. General Orek, typically stoic, arched an eyebrow in disbelief. Several dignitaries murmured among themselves, clearly torn between excitement and revulsion. Queen Sylara's voice rang out softly, but with the clear authority that belonged to her station. "Lieutenant Kane," she said, inclining her head toward the platters, "your offering is novel, to say the least. But I must confess a measure of curiosity. How did you come to discover the Dravax's vulnerabilities? No race has ever accomplished what your people claim." Kane set aside his goblet, which was filled with a delicate Xerian nectar. "It's a funny story, Your Majesty," he began, his tone relaxed, as though speaking to a friend rather than the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. Some years back, a Dravax appeared above Earth during one of our global sporting events. Let's just say, interrupting a championship football match roused the collective ire of humanity. At this, several Xerian lords leaned forward. They did not quite grasp the significance of football, but they recognized a pivotal moment in the telling. "It attacked your planet then?" inquired one of the advisors, concern evident in her voice. "How did you repel it?" Kane exchanged a knowing look with Sergeant Yates. "At first, we were on the defensive," he explained. "Our conventional weapons barely made a dent. But the Dravax's first strike landed in the middle of a city known for its resilience. When the creature roared, the people there didn't just cower. They fought back with everything they had. We discovered, quite by accident, that Dravax hide was not entirely immune to certain frequencies of ultrasonic waves. Once we focused on that vulnerability, we pushed the creature back." Another wave of murmurs spread through the hall. Sylara could sense the paradigm shift in the atmosphere. The Dravax, long believed invincible, apparently had an exploitable weakness. She cast a thoughtful gaze upon the marinated cuts of meat on the table, feeling a mixture of revulsion and intrigue. "So," the Queen ventured, "it was mere chance that led you to discover this resonance effect?" Kane nodded. "Yes and no. The initial discovery was coincidental, but once we had that inkling, our scientists got to work. Within months, we developed weapons tuned to the Dravax's unique physiology. Where older empires, including yours, saw only impenetrable scales and unstoppable fury, we found cracks in the armor." Sylara noticed a slight stiffening among her advisors. The mention of older empires and their failed attempts to defeat the Dravax carried an implicit critique. Yet, she could not deny her fascination with the humans' resourcefulness. It reminded her of the cunning that had shaped Xerian history in its nascent days, before the empire grew complacent in its grandeur. At last, Kane took a piece of the Dravax wing and bit into it. His face immediately lit up, a testament to the dish's spiciness. He said with obvious delight. "Just as good as back home. Maybe even better with that Xerian marinade we experimented with." A hushed gasp spread through the hall. The humans were not only brazen enough to slay a Dravax, they seemed positively gleeful about eating it. Some of the Xerian lords looked away in distaste, while others watched with an avid, if somewhat horrified, curiosity. Queen Sylara let the moment stretch, evaluating her own reaction. Was it revulsion? Or was it a kind of begrudging admiration? Unable to resist the tug of curiosity, she reached out and took a single piece of the strange dish. If she intended to forge a genuine alliance with these humans, she could not afford to appear squeamish, even if the act seemed unimaginable. Pressing her lips together, she took a cautious bite. The wave of heat and flavor that assaulted her senses was immediate. The spicy tang burned her tongue, eliciting a sudden intake of breath. Yet there was something else there, an alien richness, a deep savory quality that hinted at the Dravax's formidable nature. She felt her heart race, a heady rush that made her momentarily dizzy. The banqueting hall itself seemed to tilt for the briefest instant. Around her, the Xerian nobles watched with rapt attention. Some seemed almost ill at the prospect, others enthralled by the boldness of their queen. When she at last swallowed, she exhaled a slight cough, then composed herself with regal aplomb. "Indeed, quite unlike anything I have tasted before," she said, voice steady despite the fire dancing across her taste buds. Kane beamed, looking genuinely pleased. "It grows on you, Your Majesty. And it's more than just a meal. It's proof that adversity can be overcome with enough determination." In that moment, something subtle and profound passed between them. Sylara recognized in the human lieutenant a spirit as unyielding as any she had encountered among her own people. And though she would never admit it openly, she found herself intrigued, caught off guard by a flicker of possibility. Was there a path forward that neither she nor her empire had considered, one that involved a partnership with these daring newcomers? As the banquet continued, Xerian and human delegates mingled more freely. Tentative conversations blossomed into genuine exchanges of culture and knowledge. From the vantage of the high table, Sylara observed it all, occasionally meeting Kane's eyes across the distance. He would flash a quick, amiable smile, and she would incline her head in return, hidden behind the veneer of regal restraint. By the time the last dish was cleared away, the air in the hall hummed with an undercurrent of excitement. The stories of Earth's unexpected triumph over the Dravax had swept through the ranks, challenging age-old assumptions and sparking new questions. How had humans gone from an unknown backwater world to masters of a creature that once terrorized the galaxy? And, more importantly, what ambitions did they harbor now that they possessed such capabilities? Queen Sylara knew these questions would shape the negotiations yet to come. But another, more personal question nagged at her mind. Why did the brash confidence of Lieutenant Kane make her pulse quicken, even amid the gravitas of galactic politics? She did not yet have an answer, but she suspected that the events of this gathering were only the first step in a journey that would test loyalties, rewrite boundaries, and perhaps illuminate the ancient mysteries that lay hidden behind Xerian tradition. In that quiet yet charged moment, she felt a spark of something new, an awakening to a broader universe of possibilities that stretched beyond the safe confines of her empire's centuries-old worldview. Later that evening, Queen Sylara retired to her private chambers, an opulent suite perched high within the imperial palace. From her balcony, she could gaze upon the sprawling grandeur of Threxos, its crystalline towers and spires gleaming in the pale lunar light of Xeria's twin moons. Tonight, however, her thoughts were not on the Empire's familiar skyline. Instead, her mind whirled with the revelations the humans had brought. Earth had succeeded in taming a galactic terror. The Xerian Empire, by contrast, had spent untold resources merely containing the Dravax threat, often resorting to strategic retreats and complex starlane blockades to keep the beasts away from heavily populated systems. Over centuries, entire campaigns had been waged, culminating in meager victories that cost countless lives. The notion that these creatures were now served as dinner on some far-flung planet was almost absurd. Yet it was reality. A soft chime alerted her to the presence of General Orek, who had requested a private audience. Sylara crossed the polished onyx floor to let him in. He entered, bowing curtly, and took a moment to admire the twilit view before addressing the matter that clearly weighed upon him. "Your Majesty," he began, "I trust you found the humans' feast educational, if somewhat disturbing. I fear their boldness may conceal intentions we cannot yet fathom." Sylara moved past a decorative pillar, her silken robe trailing behind her. "We must not judge them too quickly, General. Their discovery changes everything we thought we knew about the Dravax. We cannot dismiss them as mere opportunists." Orek's face remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed his concern. "I agree that they have much to teach us. However, many of the High Council whisper that the humans' sudden success poses a threat. They wonder if Earth's weapons might someday be turned against the Empire." The Queen paused, considering the possibility. She had already heard the murmurs among her courtiers. Fear of the unknown often spurred paranoia. Yet she sensed something different in the humans, something that suggested they preferred cooperation to conquest. "I will not let fear dictate our policy, Orek," she said firmly. "Their approach to problem-solving might serve as a fresh perspective for us. The Dravax, after all, have long been our greatest menace." Just then, a discreet knock sounded at the chamber doors. One of the royal attendants stepped in, bowing low. "Your Majesty, Lieutenant Adrian Kane has requested a brief audience, if it pleases you." Both Sylara and Orek exchanged a glance. It was late, and protocol dictated that formal audiences usually concluded by this hour. Yet curiosity won out. She nodded. "Very well. Show him in." Orek excused himself politely, sensing that this was a conversation best held in private. Within moments, Kane entered the chamber. He still wore his Earth military uniform, now slightly disheveled after the day's events. Bowing with an easy grace, he smiled, though his demeanor held a trace of cautious respect. "Your Majesty, I hope I'm not intruding. I wish to thank you again for the hospitality and to see if you had any questions regarding our methods of taming the Dravax," he said, gesturing with open hands that indicated transparency. Sylara studied him for a long moment, noting how he did not shrink beneath her gaze. "You catch me at a moment of reflection, Lieutenant," she replied. "It is quite an adjustment, learning that what we have feared for generations has been rendered manageable." Kane nodded, stepping forward to join her at the balcony's edge. The city shimmered below, each spire illuminated by the gentle luminescence of the twin moons. "I can only imagine," he said softly. "When the Dravax first appeared in Earth's skies, it was pandemonium. We thought we were doomed. But sometimes, when survival is at stake, you discover reserves of creativity and bravery you never knew you had." The Queen turned her gaze back to him. "That is a sentiment I understand," she admitted, recalling her own struggles to hold the empire together in the face of political strife. For a moment, neither spoke. A faint breeze drifted through the balcony, stirring the folds of her robe and Kane's uniform alike. At length, Sylara sighed. "You mentioned earlier that it was the Dravax's unfortunate arrival during a sporting event that galvanized your people. I find that both amusing and strangely fitting. Conflict often arises at inopportune moments, does it not?" Kane chuckled. "Yes, indeed. Humanity's greatest leaps in technology or strategy often come from necessity. And sometimes, that necessity arises from the strangest circumstances." He paused, glancing at her with a look that was tinged with curiosity. "Pardon me if this is too forward, but I sense you're not entirely opposed to forging a closer alliance with Earth. Yet I also sense hesitation. Is it the Council?" She smiled, though her eyes held a guarded light. "You are perceptive. The High Council respects the throne, but they also hold power in their own right. Some have secret ambitions. Others are merely cautious. Aligning with Earth, especially a young, dynamic civilization, will undoubtedly unsettle the more traditional factions. They will question whether we risk too much by inviting an unknown variable." Kane leaned on the balcony rail. "And you, Your Majesty? Are you willing to take that risk?" Solara's gaze swept the cityscape. In the distance, the sprawling architecture of Threxos glowed with ancient majesty. Beyond those horizons lay star systems that had bent the knee to her empire for millennia. Her responsibilities weighed heavily on her heart, but so did the possibility of adapting and evolving. "Yes," she said at last, the words soft yet resolute. "I am willing to explore the uncharted. The old ways have served us well, but they are not without limitations. If Earth can help us conquer the Dravax threat once and for all, we could usher in a new golden age of prosperity. Or we could descend into chaos. But stagnation, in my experience, is the true enemy." Kane exhaled, as though relieved by her candor. "I'm glad you see it that way. In the spirit of mutual respect, let me offer something. My people didn't just develop weapons against the Dravax. We started breeding them in contained habitats, though breeding might be a generous word for it. We learned about their growth cycles, their vulnerabilities, and ultimately how to keep them docile. As a result, we have harnessed a potential resource, albeit a dangerous one." Solara's eyes widened slightly. "You mean to say Earth is actively farming Dravax? That is astonishing. And you would share this knowledge with us?" He nodded, though a flicker of caution crossed his face. "We would, under the right conditions. I'm no politician, but I've been authorized to discuss cooperative research. We could set up controlled environments on Xerian worlds, study the Dravax under safer conditions. It would require trust, of course." A silence stretched, thick with possibilities. Sylara understood the magnitude of such an arrangement. It would be more than just a diplomatic gesture. It would intertwine the fates of two species that until recently had known little about one another. Yet the prospect of pacifying the Dravax once and for all shone like a beacon of hope. "Trust, Lieutenant Kane," she repeated softly, letting the word resonate. "It is a precious commodity in this empire. But you have shown great trust in offering us your people's methods. I must consider carefully how to proceed." He bowed, sensing that their conversation had reached a natural pause. "Then I'll leave you to your thoughts, Your Majesty. Thank you for your time." Sylara gave a polite nod. "Thank you, Lieutenant. And please convey my regards to your delegation. In the days to come, I will speak with the Council. I suspect we have much to discuss." With that, Kane withdrew, leaving the Queen alone on the balcony. As the doors closed behind him, the quiet of the chamber returned, filled only by the faint hum of distant city life. Sylara lingered there, gazing up at the sky, her mind alight with possibilities. For the first time in many years, she felt a jolt of genuine excitement about the future. The Dravax had long been the bane of Xerian existence, a threat that shaped imperial policy through fear and caution. Yet humanity, with its brash tenacity, had not only confronted that threat, but transformed it into an advantage. Sylara wondered what else might be possible if they combined Earth's ingenuity with Xerian wisdom. And, she had to admit quietly to herself, there was a personal element too. Lieutenant Kane's frank demeanor intrigued her. Few had ever spoken to her so directly, without a hint of ingratiation or hidden agendas. Whether that was simply his nature or a calculated ploy, she could not say, but she found herself wishing to learn more. The night's breeze carried the scent of alien blossoms from the royal gardens below, mingling with the crisp air of Xeria's moonscape. It reminded her that even within the Empire's most familiar spaces, there remained much to discover. She resolved then to push forward, to defy the stagnation that so many of her predecessors had accepted as the cost of stability. Change was upon them, and she intended to guide it with a steady hand, and perhaps a bold heart, if the opportunity arose. Days passed, and the corridors of the Imperial Palace buzzed with hushed speculation. Humans and Xerians crossed paths more frequently, exchanging polite nods, curious glances, and occasionally engaging in deeper conversations about history, science, and culture. The Earth delegation was housed in a luxurious guest wing, its windows opening onto the grand avenues of Threxos, where drifting hover lanes ferried citizens between the towering spires of the city. Meanwhile, Queen Sylara convened the High Council in a private session. The circular council chamber was an impressive space, defined by a vaulted ceiling adorned with star maps of Xerian-conquered systems. Seated around a colossal black marble table were the Empire's most influential figures: lords, generals, scholars, and guild representatives. The session had been called to discuss the proposition of an alliance with Earth, which included the unprecedented sharing of technology for managing the Dravax. Sylara, seated at the head of the table, surveyed the council members with a composed demeanor. She knew each of them carried their own biases and fears. As soon as she introduced the main topic, the room erupted into competing voices. "Madness!" exclaimed Lord Imlath, a venerable noble with a silver circlet upon his brow. "To place our trust in a civilization barely known to us. Who's to say they won't exploit this knowledge to undermine our empire?" Across the table, Lady Kethra, a leading scholar, inclined her head thoughtfully. "Yet we cannot ignore what these humans have achieved. If we cast them aside, we may lose an opportunity to understand and perhaps even neutralize the Dravax threat forever." General Orek remained silent at first, his jaw clenched as he weighed the arguments. Finally, he rose, the light glinting off the ornate medals on his uniform. "I have spoken with the Queen at length. Though I share Lord Imlath's caution, I cannot deny the promise of Earth's technology. We've lost far too many warriors to Dravax attacks. If there's a chance to end that cycle, it's our duty to explore it." A murmur swept through the council. Some nodded, while others shook their heads, unconvinced. Sylara let the debate continue, her own thoughts turning to the late-night conversation with Lieutenant Kane on her balcony. In her mind, forging this partnership was more than just a strategic move. It symbolized an evolution in Xerian thinking. Still, she could not move forward without the Council's cooperation, lest civil strife ensue. As the hours wore on, the debate grew heated. Yet, through skillful mediation, Sylara guided the discussion toward compromise. She proposed a joint expedition to one of the Dravax-infested systems, an opportunity for Xerian and human teams to collaborate on controlling the creatures in their natural habitat. If successful, it would serve as undeniable proof of Earth's methods. If it failed, they would withdraw. Reluctantly, the Council agreed to sanction a small-scale operation. Lord Imlath grumbled under his breath, but offered no further objection. Lady Kethra and General Orek stood behind the Queen, pledging their full support. Thus, a monumental decision was reached. For the first time in the Empire's history, Xerian forces would coordinate with an alien civilization on a matter so critical to their survival. Word of the mission spread quickly. Within days, a specialized crew was assembled, Xerian hunters, scientists, and soldiers working alongside Earth's experts in Dravax biology. A flagship was chosen for the task, the ISS Radiance, a sleek vessel outfitted with advanced scanning equipment, containment fields, and, for the first time, experimental Dravax sonic disruptors co-developed by Earth and Xerian engineers. Lieutenant Kane volunteered to lead the human contingent. Sylara appointed General Orek as the Zirian commander, ensuring that a high-ranking official would observe and report every detail back to the council. Together, they departed from Threxos in a solemn ceremony, the hopes and anxieties of two civilizations riding on their success. The journey took them through slipstream corridors that wove between star clusters. Along the way, Kane and Orek spent long hours in the Radiance's briefing room, meticulously reviewing the data Earth had compiled on Dravax behavioral patterns. Zirian scientists, once certain that their knowledge of the creatures was exhaustive, found themselves amazed at the depth of human research, complete with neural mapping, dietary analyses, and stress response studies. Occasionally, Sylara herself would appear via holographic transmission, offering words of encouragement. She had chosen not to embark on the mission personally, citing her responsibilities at the capital. Yet as she sat in the palace, reviewing the daily reports, she found her thoughts frequently drifting to the operation's progress, and to the bold lieutenant whose determination had begun to spark a sense of admiration within her. Finally, the Radiance arrived at the designated system, a remote sector known as Varan 3. A pale, ringed planet loomed before them, girdled by ice and dust, orbiting a dim orange star. In ages past, Zirian scouts had detected Dravax nestings here, though attempts at eradication had ended in bloody stalemates. Now, the combined team planned to approach with Earth's proven tactics, a strategy they hoped would finally bring these beasts under control. As they established orbit, the Radiance's sensors lit up with telltale readings of Dravax's presence. A cluster of them roamed the planet's upper atmosphere, weaving through the swirling ice crystals in search of cosmic debris. Kane and Orek stood on the command deck, their eyes fixed on the data screens. They had prepared for this moment with careful deliberation, yet the sight of so many Dravax silhouettes still sent a ripple of dread through the Zirian crew. "Time to see if our modifications work," Kane said quietly, glancing at Orek, who nodded gravely. Under Orek's orders, the Radiance deployed a series of specialized drones, each equipped with sonic emitters calibrated to the frequency range discovered by the humans. The plan was to herd the Dravax away from the planet's storms and into a more controlled region of space, where containment nets and stasis fields could be deployed. For a tense half-hour, the bridge was alive with urgent chatter as the drones went to work, emitting pulses that resonated through the swirling atmosphere. At first, the Dravax responded with bellows, disoriented by the unfamiliar sonic waves. A few, more aggressive than the rest, charged at the drones. But the devices maneuvered with agile precision, avoiding the creatures' snapping jaws while continuing to broadcast the disruptive frequencies. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the towering beasts began to drift, corralled by invisible fences of sound. The Radiance then descended into low orbit, lowering the stasis nets. When the first Dravax roared in alarm, the team braced for a violent retaliation. Yet, to their collective relief, the beast's movements were sluggish, its usual frenzy dampened by the sonic manipulation. One by one, the Dravax were guided into the nets, where specialized energy fields constrained their formidable strength. On the bridge, Orek allowed himself a rare smile. "It's working," he said, astonishment coloring his voice. Kane clapped a hand on the general's shoulder. "We'll need to remain cautious. Even a single miscalculation could unleash chaos," he warned, though his own eyes gleamed with pride. For 2 days, the operation continued, culminating in the containment of several adult Dravax specimens. Zirian scientists took readings, collecting tissue samples and behavioral data. Human researchers, led by a sharp-witted biologist named Dr. Selma Voss, showed their Zirian counterparts how to administer feed that kept the creatures docile. Witnessing this harmony of collaborative effort, many in the expedition felt a growing optimism. Generations of fear and superstition surrounding these beasts were being challenged before their very eyes. If Earth's approach worked on such a volatile planet as Varan 3, perhaps the same strategy could be replicated across the Empire, lifting the shadow of Dravax terror once and for all. On the final day of the mission, Kane stood on an observation platform within the Radiance's hangar bay, watching through a transparent barrier as a caged Dravax rumbled in uneasy slumber. The sound of approaching footsteps made him turn. It was General Orek, accompanied by a small cadre of Zirian officers. Lieutenant Kane, the general said with uncharacteristic warmth. On behalf of the Syrian Empire, I extend my gratitude. This expedition has been a success beyond anything we dared hope. Kane dipped his head. Thank you, General. But this was a joint effort. Your own officers deserve as much credit. Orek nodded, acknowledging the point. Still, it was your people's discoveries that paved the way. I admit, I once doubted the possibility of humans taming the Dravax. Now, I see it was our mindset that needed taming. The remark held a ring of reluctant admiration. Kane recognized it as a significant gesture from a man who embodied the Empire's traditional military pride. Before he could respond, Orek continued. We'll be returning to Threxos soon, the general said. I suspect the High Council will be much more receptive to the Queen's proposal. And if they still harbor doubts, well, they can review the data and witness these creatures themselves. A moment of reflective silence passed. Kane thought of the Queen, imagining her reaction when she learned how smoothly the mission had gone. He felt a pang of longing to share the details with her personally, to see that dignified yet engaging expression cross her face as she processed the news. I look forward to seeing Her Majesty again, Kane said, choosing his words carefully. Then, with a slight grin, he added, and, of course, to strengthening the bonds between our worlds. Orek caught the subtle note in his voice, but chose not to comment. He merely nodded and gestured for Kane to follow him back to the command deck, where the entire expedition team was assembling for a final briefing. The successful capture of the Dravax was more than a military or scientific triumph. It was a harbinger of a new era, one in which Earth and Syria stood poised to reshape the galactic order, united by the extraordinary feat of transforming a menace into something manageable. Little did they know that a darker conspiracy was unfolding back on Threxos. Certain factions within the High Council were not content to share power with an upstart race like humanity. Even as celebrations began aboard the Radiance, shadowy deals were struck in the palace corridors. Soon, Queen Sylara would be forced to confront a betrayal that threatened not only the alliance she was carefully forging, but the stability of her entire empire. On the day the ISS Radiance completed its triumphant return to Threxos, a grand ceremony was arranged to honor the expedition's success. Trumpets fashioned from crystal resonators sounded through the capital's avenues, and banners emblazoned with both the Syrian imperial sigil and the Earth emblem fluttered side by side in the wind. Citizens gathered in awe, craning their necks to glimpse the fabled humans who had turned the Dravax into captives rather than conquerors. Queen Sylara presided over the festivities from a high balcony overlooking the central plaza. Flanked by her chief advisors, she watched as the Radiance's officers, Syrian and human alike, paraded down the boulevard. At the head of the column walked Lieutenant Adrian Kane and General Orek, each maintaining a proud but dignified bearing. The roar of the crowd swelled with every step they took. At the foot of the palace steps, Kane and Orek halted, bowing deeply before the Queen. Her emerald skin glowed in the midday sun, giving her an almost ethereal presence. The applause from the throng reached a fever pitch as Sylara raised her arms in a gesture of gratitude and welcome. People of the Syrian Empire, her voice carried across the plaza, amplified by subtle sonic devices. Today marks a historic moment. These brave souls have ventured forth to face our ancient menace, the Dravax, and have returned victorious. Let their valor serve as a symbol of unity, proof that even the greatest fears can be conquered through shared knowledge and collaboration. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Kane felt a swell of emotion that caught him off guard. He glanced up at Sylara, meeting her gaze across the distance. Her expression was one of regal composure, yet he sensed the warmth in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of what their two worlds had accomplished together. After the public ceremony, a more private reception took place in the palace's celestial atrium, an ornate chamber brimming with exotic plant life from across the empire. Giant blossoms hung from domed ceilings, their petals releasing subtle fragrances that blended into a heady perfume. It was here that Kane and his fellow humans found themselves mingling with Syrian dignitaries, exchanging tales of their journey on Varan III. Sylara arrived, accompanied by General Orek and the ever-watchful Lady Kethra. She thanked each member of the Earth delegation personally, showing a graciousness that was both stately and sincere. When she reached Kane, they exchanged a more personal smile. "I trust your voyage home was smooth," she said softly, standing close enough that he could detect a faint floral scent emanating from her robe. "Thankfully, yes," Kane replied, inclining his head. "Everything went according to plan, though I suspect you've already received Oryx reports." She gave a knowing nod, her gaze briefly flicking to the general. "He was quite thorough. The council has been in an uproar of disbelief and excitement. I believe many of them are ready to embrace this alliance wholeheartedly." Kane hesitated, recalling something Oryx had mentioned. Certain factions within the council remained hostile. But before he could broach the subject, a sudden commotion drew their attention. An attendant rushed in, whispering urgently into Lady Kethra's ear. The scholar's face blanched, and she hurried to Sylara's side. "Your Majesty," Kethra said, voice quivering. "There has been an incident in the lower archives. Explosions triggered by an unknown saboteur. We suspect it may be related to the Dravax research files." Sylara stiffened, her posture taut with alarm. "Any casualties?" "Several injured," Kethra replied grimly. "And the archive's main data vault has been damaged. We are uncertain how much of our work on the Dravax has been lost." King caught Sylara's eye. In that moment, he saw her mask of composure falter ever so slightly. A dark suspicion flickered in his mind. Someone was trying to disrupt their collaboration, striking at the heart of the new knowledge they had built together. "I must see to this immediately," Sylara said, turning to Kane. Her tone was apologetic but firm. "We will speak more soon." Kane nodded. "If there's anything my team can do to help, please let us know. Our data backups might be of use." The Queen offered him a grateful look before hurrying out of the atrium with Lady Kethra and Oryx in tow. In their wake, the reception dissolved into anxious murmurs. The day of celebration had taken a sharp and unsettling turn. That evening, the corridors of the palace were tense. Guards stood at every junction, scanning passers-by with heightened vigilance. Strange rumors circulated. Some claimed the saboteur was a rogue Xerian aristocrat opposed to the alliance, while others whispered of external agents hoping to seize the Dravax research for their own ends. Whatever the truth, a sense of unease hung like a heavy cloud. Kane found himself summoned to a secure briefing room alongside Sergeant Yates, Dr. Voss, and a small delegation of Earth scientists. Seated at the head of the table was General Oryx, his stern features shadowed by the low lighting. Lady Kethra joined them, looking weary and distraught. "We have reasons to believe," Oryx began, speaking in a clipped tone, "that certain individuals within the High Council have funded this sabotage. Their aim is to undermine the alliance and possibly take control of the Dravax program for themselves." Lady Kethra's shoulders sagged. "These conspirators remain hidden. We're sifting through what remains of the archives, but our main data vault is severely compromised. Thankfully, we have partial backups stored in outlying facilities. Still, the immediate damage is considerable." Kane's eyes narrowed. Why sabotage the research? If they oppose the alliance, wouldn't they just refuse cooperation instead of destroying the data? Oryx exchanged a grim look with Kethra. "We suspect they intend to hoard the knowledge. Our records suggest that elements within the High Council once tried to control the Dravax through illicit experiments. They failed spectacularly, but the desire for a living superweapon may still linger. By erasing the official files, they could cloak their own endeavors in secrecy, all while blaming the humans for any treachery." Sergeant Yates let out a low whistle. "That's twisted." "Yes," Lady Kethra agreed. "Twisted, but plausible. We must root out the conspirators before they move to the next phase of their plan. It's possible they intend to capture and breed Dravax outside official oversight, which could lead to unimaginable destruction if they lose control." Kane leaned forward, adrenaline surging. "So how do we proceed?" Oryx's stern visage hardened. "We need solid evidence. And we need to ensure that the Queen remains safe. Her authority is our best chance of quelling any coup or factional uprising. If the conspirators succeed in compromising her position, the Empire could fracture." A solemn hush fell over the room. Kane realized the enormity of what they faced. This was no longer just about forging a bond between Earth and Xeria. It was about safeguarding an entire civilization from internal collapse. Then Lady Kethra spoke up. "We've identified certain leads, unusual fund transfers, suspicious troop movements, encrypted communications. We propose forming a small task force to investigate quietly. Lieutenant Kane, your involvement would be invaluable. As outsiders, you and your team are free from local allegiances. Kane nodded. We'll do whatever we can. A decision was made. In the coming days, Kane, Yates, and a select group of Earth and Xerian agents would follow the money trails, sift through hidden channels, and possibly infiltrate clandestine gatherings of council members suspected to be part of the conspiracy. While this secret work began, Sylara found herself beset on all sides by political pressures. The more moderate council members demanded swift reassurance that the saboteur would be found, while the conservatives veiled their skepticism behind polite inquiries and endless procedural delays. Through it all, she kept a regal bearing, never revealing the turmoil that churned within. Late one night, in the hush of her private study, Sylara finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Her thoughts lingered on the day's heartbreak, the shattered archives, the sight of wounded archivists, the constant sense of betrayal lurking behind the palace walls. Where once she felt only excitement for the Alliance, she now grappled with a grim realization. Every step toward progress was fraught with danger, and those who feared change would stop at nothing to halt it. A gentle knock on the door startled her from her reverie. She called for the visitor to enter, expecting perhaps an attendant or an envoy. Instead, Lieutenant Kane stepped inside, accompanied by a discreet palace guard who bowed and withdrew. "Lieutenant," Sylara said, a note of relief softening her voice. "I didn't know you were still awake." He offered a respectful bow, then moved closer, concern evident in his gaze. "I couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. I was hoping to speak with you, Your Majesty, off the record, if possible." She gestured for him to sit. "Then please, have a seat. And you may call me Sylara, for now. We are alone." He hesitated, then lowered himself into a nearby chair. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet of the study enveloped them, a small haven in a palace teeming with tension. "Sylara," he began, carefully, "I wanted you to know that we're working to uncover who's behind the sabotage. We have leads suggesting a faction within the council. We'll be discreet." She folded her hands in her lap. "I expected as much. Orek informed me of the operation. I only wish there were some other way. Sometimes, I wonder if forging this alliance was worth all the blood and sleepless nights." Kane leaned forward, earnest conviction in his eyes. "I believe it will be worth it, if we succeed. Nothing about changing the status quo is ever easy. But I've seen firsthand how inspired the Xerian citizens are by what we accomplished with the Dravax. The tide can still turn in our favor." She managed a thin smile. "You speak with the optimism of a man who has seen impossible things become reality. Perhaps that's what our empire needs right now." He paused, as though choosing his next words with caution. "I also came to say that I'm grateful for the chance to fight for this alliance. It's not just about bridging two worlds. It's about proving that fear doesn't have to rule us, that we can rise above it together." A subtle warmth stirred in Sylara's chest. She found herself recalling the moment she first tasted the Dravax wings, the shock of their heat, the astonishing realization that the unstoppable could indeed be vanquished. Now, that same shock echoed in the way Kane looked at her, with a respect that transcended mere duty. "Thank you, Adrian," she said, quietly using his first name for the first time. The sound of it on her lips made her heart quicken. "I appreciate your resolve." They shared a moment of unspoken understanding, two individuals from vastly different worlds brought together by circumstance, each bearing the weight of their people's hopes. Outside, the palace corridors remained patrolled by vigilant guards, and beyond those walls, conspirators plotted in dark corners. Yet in the hush of that study, the seeds of trust and camaraderie grew stronger, like a beacon cutting through the fog of uncertainty. Eventually, Kane rose, offering a polite bow. "I'll let you rest, Sylara. Tomorrow promises to be another eventful day. We'll find whoever did this, and we'll stop them." She nodded, watching him leave. Long after the door closed, she remained in her chair, staring at the gently flickering lanterns that illuminated the study. In that flicker, she saw both the fragility and resilience of hope. Despite the conspiracies and betrayals, a part of her believed that together, humanity and Xeria could forge something greater than either had known before. And though she would never dare whisper it aloud, she sensed that in Adrian Kane, she had found not merely an ally, but a kindred spirit, someone willing to face the darkness, no matter the cost, in the pursuit of a brighter horizon. In the days that followed, the clandestine task force worked tirelessly to uncover the plot against the Alliance. Their investigations led them through hidden passageways in the palace sublevels, into off-world data caches, and even to a secret council of influential lords bent on wresting control of the Dravax research. At last, through careful coordination between Xerian loyalists and Earth specialists, the saboteurs were unmasked. The ringleader turned out to be Lord Imlath himself, long a proponent of retaining the Empire's old ways. Consumed by ambition, he had funded illicit experiments to weaponize Dravax DNA, hoping to create a fearsome military force that would place him in a position of unrivaled power. By destroying the official research files, he intended to leave only his private lab's breakthroughs intact. During a tense confrontation in a secret warehouse at the edge of Threxos, Kane and Orek confronted Imlath, who tried to unleash a caged Dravax he had smuggled into the city. But the sabotage was foiled when Sergeant Yates disabled the creature's restraints with a sonic disruptor, sending it into a docile stupor. With Imlath apprehended and his allies scattered, the conspiracy collapsed. The High Council, shaken by the revelation that one of its own had plotted a coup, united behind Queen Sylara and vowed to strengthen ties with Earth as a measure against further treachery. Those scars remained, both among the Council and in the damaged archives. The Empire emerged more unified than before. Before the Earth delegation departed, Sylara invited Kane to a private farewell in her royal gardens. Beneath the swirling blossoms of a magnificent starflower tree, they walked side by side along a sparkling fountain that seemed to sing in subtle harmonics. "I owe you a debt," Sylara said softly. "Not only did you help save our research, you revealed the treachery festering within our empire. Had Lord Imlath succeeded, I shudder to think of what might have befallen us." Kane shook his head. "You don't owe us anything, Sylara. We came here to build bridges, and I'm glad we succeeded. Besides," he added with a grin, "if you ever decide to visit Earth, I promise to show you a proper football game, without any Dravax interruptions." She chuckled at the mental image. For a moment, the tension of recent events lifted, replaced by an easy camaraderie. "I confess, I never imagined Earth would offer our people such enlightenment," she said, turning to meet his gaze. "But it has, and you have." In the hush that followed, Kane stepped closer, compelled by a draw he couldn't quite name. The shimmering leaves overhead cast dancing lights across Sylara's emerald skin. He recalled the first time they met, her regal poise and captivating presence. Now, she seemed closer somehow, both otherworldly and achingly human in her vulnerabilities. "Sylara," he began, his voice low, "if we've proven one thing, it's that our peoples aren't so different when we stand against fear together." She nodded, and in her eyes, he saw a quiet resolve. "I believe we can accomplish wonders, Adrian." The faintest hint of a smile touched her lips. "And I would very much like to see that future with my own eyes." They stood there for a moment, the starflower blossoms drifting in a gentle breeze, the night sky beyond the palace walls alive with constellations. Unspoken emotions coalesced between them: respect, gratitude, perhaps the beginnings of something neither had expected. Then, with a soft laugh that was half relief, half hope, Sylara reached out and briefly clasped Kane's hand. It was a simple gesture, yet it felt monumental in its significance. Two civilizations, once separated by the vastness of space and centuries of divergent evolution, had found common ground not merely through politics, but through genuine empathy and trust. Soon, the Earth delegation prepared to return to their homeworld, carrying the formalized alliance treaties. The Xerian Empire, for its part, stood ready to expand the joint Dravax programs across its domains, no longer paralyzed by fear. In the months that followed, diplomatic missions became commonplace, with Xerian envoys traveling to Earth to experience the peculiar wonders of human culture, those spicy wings included. Meanwhile, Sylara led her empire with renewed purpose. Gone was the notion that tradition alone could safeguard their future. Under her guidance, old customs blended with new philosophies, forging a civilization eager to embrace fresh ideas. And in her private moments, she found herself exchanging messages with Lieutenant Kane, discussing not just policy, but small, everyday details of their respective worlds. Two leaders forging a friendship that transcended borders and, perhaps, hinted at something more. Over time, the alliance between Earth and Syria blossomed into something truly unprecedented, allowing both peoples to tackle the great challenges of their era, colonizing hazardous star systems, mastering new technologies, and ensuring the once terrifying Dravax posed no further threat. And though the galaxy still held its share of perils, hope now shimmered at its heart, a testament to what could be achieved when fear gave way to understanding. Thus, in the grand halls of Syrian history, Queen Sylara and the human Lieutenant Adrian Kane were immortalized as the unlikely architects of a new epic, their story retold through centuries as a testament to bravery, collaboration, and the boundless power of imagination. In the end, the Dravax, once the galaxy's deadliest predator, became but a humble footnote in the tale of two worlds that dared to dream, forging everlasting bonds across the stars. And so, under the shimmering glow of distant constellations, the saga found its joyful conclusion, an ending, to be sure, but also the beginning of something far greater.